Welcome everyone here for joining us for the Fireside Chat. In this Fireside Chat, we want to discuss AI in reality. So we want to skip all the hype stuff and vision stuff and say, okay, we are a practitioners conference. We do open source and data and AI in practice for more than 10 years. And I'm really happy to have all of you here on stage to tell us more about yourself, how you think, how you work with AI in real life, and yeah, let's start with a short intro. Walid, what's your journey? Where did you start? What's the recipe to become the CDO of Merck?
Happy to do so. So how many hours do we have?
We have all the time we need.
All the time we need. Okay, so
yeah, no, make
it of course,
maybe
joking.
Keep it short. We have some.
Okay. I can try to keep it short and sweet. So my name is Walid. I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer at Merck, which is the keystone sponsor for PyCon. Glad to have you here, and also. Happy to. And also located in Darmstadt, we are a 357-year-old company in the meantime, still family-owned in the 13th generation. I always like to joke like we are the oldest scale-up in the world, because if Merck has one ability, it is pivoting. So it started off as a pharmacy, it went into pharmaceuticals, into life sciences, into consumer electronics, and in the performance materials and electronics space afterwards. So if one thing is in the DNA of this company, it is change. It is pivoting where it's needed. So anything new is welcome to the organization. It's a science and technology company, so people are naturally very curious about it. So honestly, it's a perfect place for me to be in the data AI space, and our journey is now 4 years in with the company. I started off as the Chief Data Officer, and then as always including analytics, and then as AI rose to prominence and relevance, also, let's say, broadened the scope and the topics about it. I guess that has to do it for starters.
Oh, well, let's dig a little bit deeper, because I've done some research. Where did you actually start? Actually, is it true you just started programming databases and websites before you joined consulting?
Exactly. So my background is in computer science. Actually, I'm a big fan of interpretable languages that start with P, not Python, because back in my days, end of the 90s, it was Perl. So the Camel book was, and we didn't have Stack Overflow, we didn't have ChatGPT or anything. That was, let's say, different kind of coding back in the days, but that was my background in programming, in database administration, network administration, system administration. Then 13 years of consulting, and then getting fed up with being, let's say, like a midwife, just bringing things to life when not taking responsibility. So taking over an operational role at Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart, and then at Merck 4 years ago.
Oh, sound like a curious person.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, what's your journey?
My journey, yeah, good question.
Like, how do you come? Like, we know each other from bringing Python to quantitative asset manager, Quoniam. So, what was your journey? Because you were one of the drivers behind it. Why Python? Why not just buy software? Where did you start?
Yeah, so maybe I start with my academic journey. So I'm a physicist, and I did my PhD in economics. So how does that work? There was a professor back then who ran a quantitative hedge fund, and this is all about statistics and computer science. But you could not give a PhD in physics for that, right? So I had to live with then receiving a PhD in economics, which didn't hurt as well. But this is when I fell in love with Python and computer science, and also machine learning back then. Of course, nobody was talking about generative AI. I started with Emacs, pre-Pandas, pre-scikit-learn, so this is where my journey started. Still, we would do machine learning, neural networks especially. Yeah, and then I had several positions, consulting enterprises, EnBW, for example. And my journey then took me to where I am today as a CTO and partner at Quoniam Asset Management. Quoniam is a company that most of you won't know, so I'll briefly explain what it does. It is a quantitative asset manager. which means we digest data, we apply analytics to it, also machine learning, also Gen AI by now. And at the end, what comes out are portfolios optimized for return, risk, and the environment, so what is called ESG. And as you rightly said, you were one of the people who supported us in this journey from moving from a really legacy and scattered tech stack. So back then we had SAS, R, C#, a little bit of Python, a lot of SQL, and we harmonized this into Python. Yeah, so this is how we got to know each other. Yeah.
Cool. Ines, where did you start? How did spaCy happen? So did you start with programming?
Yes, I've always actually programmed as a teenager. I mean, I think you know the story. I know,
but we have to bring it to the audience.
Yeah.
Not for me, the questions.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, as a teenager, I was kind of an indoor child. Didn't have that many friends and mostly spent time at home in front of the computer. And so I discovered that in Microsoft Word, you could make websites. And so I uploaded my own website. I was like 11 and then got really into actually writing the code, having my own blog. I did like a music blog, I had a personal blog, I did all kinds of things. But I didn't actually end up doing computer science because at the time I didn't really feel like a programmer. You know, when I thought of programmers, those were like the boys in the computer club. And I didn't really, you know, I was a woman, I was doing websites, I loved design, loved writing. And so, yeah, I did communication science and media science and linguistics. So that was, you know, that actually ended up becoming much more relevant later on, a bit of computational linguistics, worked in media for a while, and then kind of by coincidence, I found this area where I could really create a job for myself and combine everything I'm passionate about, like from product to actually hands-on writing code, building tools for people to use, language, working with text. And so, yeah, I met my co-founder, Matt. He was previously in academia, left academia when he realized that companies were using his research code, which was totally not designed to be used in production. And he really saw, also he was at a point where he had to write grant applications. So he was like, nah, I'll focus on doing something that's really designed from day one for real products. And yeah, we started working together, founded a company together, and yeah, what we're really focusing on is building developer tools, and especially building developer tools that help companies do AI development themselves, again, in-house, take back control, and really, instead of just using the latest large models as the system, actually use them to create systems. So that's, you know, from helping you design models to actually training your very own fully private, accurate, fast, small models in-house.
Actually, you could put like, spaCy comes from messy research code. I mean, I'm just referring to the keynote.
I mean, I don't know how messy.
No,
like,
no.
Matt would take offense to that.
No offense, but if you attended the keynote from Guada this morning, I mean, we were talking about space, the Euclid mission, cosmology, dark matter. She said, oh, we had this messy research base,
yeah,
like also the code. So actually, you could also say, this was a research project, and you brought it into production. And spaCy, it's really hard to find real numbers because there's so many statistics, but I could say it's at least like 500 million downloads. So basically, it's a state-of-the-art open source tool you brought from a research project with Matthew into production, into, yeah, it's around for like 10
companies,
around for 10 years. I think that's awesome. So what gets you going, like, every morning? So you already have to go one of the go-to tools for natural language processing. So yeah, what's sparked the commitment to open source?
Yeah, I mean, I do think open source is a great way to create a lot of value for people. And I think very early on we realized that there's not really an advantage in locking up proprietary software. It all comes from open research anyway, so there's not really an advantage you have by not open sourcing it, and what's much more valuable for companies are the actual use cases and the data and what you apply it to. So I think it's been very inspiring to see what people build with our software, and actually at every conference I go to, and especially here, I meet users, people at companies, they tell me what they've built. There's so many interesting use cases and so much I've learned, and it's really nice to see that the software actually can apply in all kinds of verticals.
Curiosity and application.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and the successful projects we see, those are really spearheaded by often even a single developer who identifies a need and really has subject matter expertise, and there's a problem, I need to fix it. And it's never been so easy to get into programming, pick up Python, pick up NLP, and get going. And yeah, we've seen like a lot of success stories of developers just fixing problems and doing the thing.
Alex, which core ideas drive AI and open source at Quoniam?
Which core values?
Yeah, why Python? Why open source? What's the reason to do like this fundamental paradigm shift?
Yeah. So we came from a world where we sat on, as I just said, like SQL and SAS and all that. And well, the one thing is that you always have a vendor lock-in, right? Which is naturally something that you are trying to avoid at a company. And then, as you just said, so much innovation happens in open source, especially Python. And for us, as a quantitative asset manager, what we do is we work with data. We do a lot of analytics, and at the end, we produce signals, right? So what do we want to trade? How does our portfolios look like? But that's, at the end of the day, that's all data and analytics, right? So Python comes as a natural choice somehow, right? There weren't big discussions around that, right? So we had to collect a little bit in the beginning and tell the people, well, you cannot use R anymore. You cannot use SAS anymore. Please migrate away from that. And it was good. Yeah. And if I look where we are now with Python, I think we have a great journey behind us. We have reached a really professional, great development state. And this allows us now for the whole company to take in the new things like Gen AI and make them available throughout the whole company. Which I think is really good and really helpful.
Thanks. So, well, what keeps you going? And you have like a lot. Like Merck is like a really big company. Yeah. We have like life science. You have electronics, which you will know. You have pharmaceuticals. Yeah. So what keeps you motivated? Like getting everybody on board with data and AI, and possibly also some migration and innovation and everything. I mean, it's like sounds like a lot to handle.
It is, to a certain degree, let's say a large challenge. So as a company, we have 63,000 employees worldwide. And when I started the job, I had an interview with my now CEO, Belen, and she asked me, what is my dream? And I told her my dream is that you don't need me anymore, because 63,000 people in this company breathe data and AI. Everybody knows what it is, when it's useful, when it's not useful, and can apply it, then my mission is done, and then I can retire. So still a few years to retirement, unfortunately. but that is what keeps me up. So and I like what you said, Iris, when essentially subject matter expertise and technology expertise come together. Unfortunately, it is separated often in people. So my mission, or the mission of my team to a certain degree, obviously is to lower the entry barrier when it comes to technology. Similarly, you described it, Alex. So we give it a name, we call it Optimize, our data and AI ecosystem. That is our overall architecture, and also our promise to the organization that the tech stack that we provide is secure, compliant, and cost efficient, and more open source, because it is something that is very dear to us, and we're open sourcing ourselves. And the second piece is also educating and training the people so they get the skills. Not everybody can be a full-time developer, but you get foundational skills, you get low-code, no-code environments where people can get productive. And the more people on the ground know what AI can do for them and what it can't do, which is equally important, or maybe even more important, the more they can be, let's say, as subject matter experts, a better counterpart and ally for a developer to build the stuff that matters and that makes a difference in the business.
And I think you bring up a really important part, because you don't talk how we use this library, use this technology. You basically say it's all about humans. Like a big part, which is probably overlooked in all tech development, innovation, is the human migration part.
I wouldn't call it migration in this.
No, I'm sorry.
Because it's, but actually, yes. In our strategy, in our data and AI strategy, we always I like to call it the Holy Trinity.
Yeah.
And we've got 3 dimensions, and it's not rocket science. You can find that in multiple articles, but it's people first.
Yeah.
It's the mindset and the skill set. Then it's about the ways of working. So how do we orchestrate and integrate? And the second one, and the third and last one, which is also important, is the technology piece. Those are the libraries and the services, and what do we use in globally, what do we use in the US, what do we use in China, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So what's your strategy? Very often I see people like to do what they do and stay in their routines. So what's your approach? Like making them opening up, say, hey, there's something new. We have to innovate. We have to become better. We have to evolve. Because very often people just like, hey, I know how I'm doing this. I'm doing it for 20 years. Why should I change? So
see, that's the funny thing, or the good thing about Merck as a company.
Okay.
So the company vision is sparking discovery, elevating humanity. So there is already a very high ambition.
Great.
What we do makes a difference, and to a certain degree, it makes sense also in the pharma healthcare space where we develop drugs, where we have a large fertility business, where we help to bring babies to the world for those who otherwise wouldn't be able to do so. So there is but sparking discovery is about the small innovations. It's about, so curiosity is, let's say, part of the DNA of the company. So to a certain degree, I just have to trigger it. So but that's maybe a bit of a luxury situation.
But also, it's value. You say, okay, we help babies. We just don't sell a consumer product or like something entertainment. Basically, hey, we help save lives, make people's lives better.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, Alex. So we started in the middle of the pandemic with migrating Python. So what has changed then? Anything also changed? Culture, work, I think with opening up to open source, migration always also has changed in structure and people. So what has changed since then? So before people were doing their jobs, and now we bring a lot of innovation to the company. What has changed?
Yeah, very good question. We made one very important decision in the very beginning, which was to use Python throughout the whole company, right? And this opens a lot of doors, obviously. So back then, application development was C#, research, for example, was R. The 2 teams couldn't talk to each other, they couldn't learn from each other, they couldn't share code, they simply had to live side by side, right? And this has fundamentally changed to the very good of the company, obviously, right? So as of today, the teams work much more integrated. There is way more exchange, which makes us faster, which increases quality, of course, because the business people and the tech people, they can work with the same language at the end of the day. And for our business people, it's a natural thing also to understand a bit of coding, so they also understand what Python means, how to work with it. The researchers especially, they're very good in these things as well. So there's a lot of harmonization happening, which I think is great.
So actually the strategy is not individualism was not the strategy. Say, oh, you like this language more, go for it. Like that means, hey, let's bring the whole team on board. Let's normalize, let's standardize, let's improve our communication, and also, of course, asset managers. Of course, many people are very skilled in math, so programming is not that far, and you basically open up, and you can basically avoid a lot of misunderstandings through normalization and bringing everybody on the same
And it makes
standard.
it faster, right? So the first steps, everyone has to realign a little bit their way of working, right? That causes friction. I think we can all imagine that. But then once you are behind these initial fires that you have to live with, you really feel how this harmonization speeds you up and makes you better.
Thank you. Different perspective. I think 10 years ago, spaCy, and spaCy was, I would say, an immediately hit, and was an immediate success, I would say, because there was what's it called? NLP, the other thing.
NLTK.
NLTK, yes, right.
That was more like designed for teaching and research.
And
So they really, at the time, there wasn't anything like
when I started, there was NLTK, and then spaCy came along, and spaCy was, wow, this is like so much cooler, and you basically were like an immediately success, like the go-to package that makes things easier. And I think that's the important part here. You also had like early adopters in Fortune 500, many companies. And could you give us some insight? What made them go very early? We're talking like 2015, 2016 times. Open source is still, I would argue, for many enterprises, something exotic. Who was smarter than the others, and what made them special, like cultural-wise, or whatever you have experienced? Just like say, who were your early adopters, and if you have an idea, why?
Yeah, so I mean, 2015, that was also roughly when we kind of saw the first NLP hype and chatbots first came out, and so I think there was a lot of interest. But I think on the other hand, we actually saw something quite similar to what we're seeing today. That, like, you know, especially decision makers, like they hear AI, nowadays generative AI, and are like, oh my God, we need to do something. Some companies actually want prestige projects, and they usually fail. It's like, oh, let's just do a chatbot, and that never makes it out of the prototype phase. But of course, there are other companies that are engaging with it in a more reasonable way, and so we definitely we've seen that. We've also actually some of our earliest projects that we worked on with companies were helping teams at large organizations move their AI development back in-house, because they had, like, for example, their managers went to World of Watson in Las Vegas. I don't know if you remember these TV commercials with Mad Men's Don Draper and like, ooh, the glowing brain, and they'd excitedly get back and are like, oh, we have like all of these AI platforms now, and the developers were like, okay, and then they would, for example, pick up spaCy, run some experiments, and they realized, oh, we can build something much better and much faster, fully private in-house. We don't need these platforms that we sort of bought into.
Like what apart, because like I know the spaCy documentation. I mean, this is, I think, if I would vote like which project has the most awesome documentation online, I would probably say spaCy, because you spend a lot of time.
That's true.
And so it was probably not the documentation. It's very often missing open source packages, so you can go to consulting, and the consultants know how to use it because it's like a black box. Yeah. So you didn't go to explain on the undocumented stuff. What did you consult on? Where were the pain points you could help them to solve? Like, where did they really struggle, like, apart from how to use spaCy?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned actually the documentation, because that was, we were quite conscious about like our business model, because, monetizing open source is difficult, and we always saw that there would otherwise be this conflict of interest. If our offering was, hey, we help you use spaCy, then if our documentation is too good, we don't, nobody needs our help, and if we make our documentation bad, then, well, nobody uses our software. So, we always saw it more around like workflows and really getting teams productive, because the hard part of machine learning, even years ago, it was never the actual training or like even developing the models. It kind of doesn't matter that much. It's really about how to take a business problem and break that down into components that you can solve with machine learning. And also remembering that this is not a competition, like you're allowed to make problems easier. We're not in research here. Like, I mean, it sounds trivial, but like actually, it's something I think it's very important. We have to remind ourselves, like, what are the easiest components that we can build, and also how can we build systems that work with the best practices and principles we have built up as an industry over the years.
I can very much relate to that. I remember this one discussion with a client. He wanted to use some super fancy algorithm, just like it developed and published by Uber, and it was about temperature. And I said, well, you're the physicist. I just had physics in school, but I think temperature is something we really well understand. How about trying a regression and stuff like that? Yeah. Like really say, hey, we want to solve the problem. We don't get paid to pay with fancy tech.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the companies that actually saw that and really focused on that, those were usually the projects that were also most successful. And I think some companies realized earlier on that, hey, we can totally do our own development in-house. We can build our own systems that we own, that we fully control. And you know, it's totally possible. Like we've learned outsourcing development never really worked. We learned that in the 90s. Outsourcing data development, annotation, we've also realized that doesn't work. We need people with the connection to the task.
Too many layers of communication where stuff
Yeah,
gets
and have
lost.
as you described, like have the teams collaborating together, also across, subject matter experts, machine learning developers. Often that can be the same person, and I think that's definitely where most of the success happens, from what we've seen.
Early developer, early adapter. I read you built my GTP. You worked with OpenAI when JTP2 was a thing.
Not me, my team.
Yes, your team. You and your team, and you enabled your team. You also, and just in the other room, your team is giving a tutorial on Baby.
Yes,
which is some
exactly.
Merck open source. Sorry for the bad timing.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that too.
Yeah, it's no problem. Yeah. So.
But that's why the other room is full, and this is.
It's more people than it looks like. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, we have a capacity for 1,200 people in this room, and we have 1,500 people on site. So this is really good. So you also now go into open source. What's the strategy like, or what's your approach? Like you start with open. So you're all with you're like the best friends with OpenAI. You have your own GTP. So I mean, you started early. So there's open source. I see that you see like there's a mixture.
Yeah.
And how do you decide when to do what, or probably maybe stop, like.
So I'm one of those executives you've been talking about, to a certain degree, but I try to be not in the way. When people who know stuff better than I do, let's say, call the shots, or when they make suggestions. So the fun story that you mentioned was when ChatGPT came out, and I saw it and I said, okay, guys, we need to talk and we need to put an NDA in place, and we need to see how we can leverage that technology. And then the team just looked at me and told me, you signed that NDA 9 months ago. And I said, oh, great, well done, good work, team. And at the time they told me there was a research lab and I don't need to know too much about it. Long story short, what we did the team did in 6 months was to build our own in-house clone based on the Microsoft Cognitive Services, and now then a collaboration with a startup afterwards. So we sundowned the original solution and then went with a Berlin startup called Langdog to develop our MyGPT suite. And ultimately, what we do is to balance things out in terms of what's the best for the company. If it's open source, great. That is always our, let's say, preferred go-to when there is something that is enterprise ready that we can leverage. If it is not, then we look for partners, and partners can be big or small. If they're small, even better, because we can offer them more as a company. If your partner is big, if it's a large multinational corporation like ourselves, they only want our money and our brand to a certain degree. Younger companies are more curious in terms of learning the subject matter expertise, have an environment where they can grow and also where they can prove themselves. And this is where, as we are open, curious, and also experimental to a certain degree, we are open to it. And this is maybe a competitive advantage compared to other large companies you don't see on the sponsor list, that they say, okay, what have the others done?
Yeah.
Where does this work? And can I buy it from a large company like myself that I could sue if it doesn't work? So that's not our strategy to a certain degree. So our strategy is find the best solution that works for the company, and then scale it in a global environment.
And so, as I understand it, you were an early adopter. You made the experience, but still made the call. We don't want to stick with my GTP anymore. Rather go a better solution on the market.
We pivoted to a solution on the market.
Already we're well educated with all the prior knowledge, being an early adopter as well.
And it might change again in a year. I wouldn't know.
And you're basically not riding a dead horse. Like just because we build it, we have to keep it going.
That's
a brave move. So how do you communicate something like this? Because I think many people have spent a lot of passion into it, building it. It's like a baby. And how can you say, oh no, please send it away.
Well, you really have to believe in the upside,
Yeah.
and you have to focus on the upside.
Okay.
There will always be, let's say, reflexes, and there will be intuition that goes against it. But if the case is strong, and in that, I essentially, what I told the team at the time, okay, we have 2 developers maybe full-time on the topic, and a few others very, very part-time. They have 4 developers, and they're a startup. They're working day and night. They don't have family. So code quality or product quality is good. So I say they will overtake us in 3 to 6 months. So why not join forces now? So, and again, it is a case by case, and ultimately you always have to tell the people what's in it for them. And if there's not enough in it for them, then maybe, it wasn't the best decision to take.
Interesting. So basically, was this also like just to make the right move? And sometimes sharing and joining forces is better? How can this help in Germany, joining forces in open source, developing software together, even if it's a competitor?
Competitor is always a bit tricky, to be honest, but there's a lot of companies in Germany that are not direct competitors. For example, E.ON, with whom we are exchanging pretty extensively. So it doesn't always have to mean that you are, let's say, in a competition space. And it's not only open source; it's open source and also giving startups a chance. So essentially, startups need large companies, and I believe large companies would benefit a lot from the startup environment, and also small and medium-sized companies would benefit a lot from open source and collaborating with startups. And I believe there needs to be more openness in terms of, okay, this is not, I have to buy it from the one vendor that essentially brings the standard solution to it. That is too easy, and I also believe a bit outdated in the 21st century.
Oh, yeah. Sure, I agree. It's like, so open question to the group, because we're talking about speed, innovation. You basically just explained your strategy for speed, for innovation, calls to make. So do we actually have enough skilled people around in Germany for really driving, building software, or do we rather, the better strategy is buy? So is it make? Do we have enough resources and smarts to make, or do we need to buy? What's your take on that? Just like, you can think a little bit about it. So
I could start with a thought, but it's maybe not as technical. I think
that's probably not also technical. Maybe other skills like collaboration, communication, everything that makes the project going, everything that brings us into application.
Because you also said like Germany and what it means like for, or maybe let's make it Europe. I think it's a question of mindset also. When we look into the US, if you look into China, I think they have that mentality of doing it and not asking 100,000 questions first. Right?
But you think that's good?
Oh, now it gets interesting.
What I'm saying is, and I can say this from my own experience, it needs to be balanced at the end of the day. And my personal opinion is that in Europe there is too much weight on regulating things. Maybe that's especially true for me because I'm in the financial sector. Maybe there it's even more than in other industries. But even get tiny things rolling, like simply doing things, finding out the value, right, is sometimes very, very difficult because you have to take a lot of bureaucratic hurdles first. And then when we talk about regulation, it's a good thing, right? Also, I think we can all agree that from a European perspective, the US and China don't do enough. But then the question is, how do you apply regulation, right? And that is really very, very difficult in many cases when the regulator itself cannot really tell you what they expect. So you're kind of left alone on high sea, and at some point in the future, somebody may or may not come and tell you, oh, all what you did is wrong, right? And that leads to the effect that you're doing way more than you should do, that you're producing way more paper than you should do, and all that is not creating value, right? And I think that is a problem that we have to solve. Yeah.
No, and I think overall, I mean, we do have the, the general skills and the general industry, because I mean, AI is kind of an interesting field because it is becoming more and more important to have like a university's degree to get a job, even though the things you actually learn are much less relevant. You don't need a PhD in machine learning to do something productive in the field, and I think we do have a lot of a lot of interesting business use cases, a lot of skilled people, and a lot of problems. And I think we should focus on that instead of trying to I don't know. Chase after some idea we have for maybe looking at the US and how do we need our own OpenAI? Do we need do we need all these like
I think one of the key messages is here, okay, we just need like stability and clarity. That's the thing. Because of course, like imagine somebody to do code review who cannot program, but sometimes it could happen with a regulator, just like over-exaggerating a bit, and nobody wants to take real responsibility. And I don't only see this in finance. I also saw it recently. My husband in the chemical industry. Sometimes people, it works, or the paperwork isn't fit, but nobody wants to sign it off and take responsibility. So anyway,
we need to understand the technology in order to regulate it. Well,
if I may add quickly to that one, because I would second everything that was said, but maybe a little add. I believe on the talent side, Germany and Europe is solid, definitely. Yeah. On the industry side, we're also very solid. So we are still one of the highest GDPs in the world. We have a lot of, let's say, classic industries. So there's a lot of interesting application fields for AI that are just lying around to a certain degree. So we have talent. And we have the application fields, but somehow still we're not leading in those things, and scale is missing. Why is that? I believe something of a catalyst, maybe there's a disconnect or something. People, when they really want to scale, and I also hear this from startups, they tell them, you need to go to the US because there you will grow and you will find customers. And I believe what is missing is a bit of openness in terms of experimentation and in terms of giving the young talent a chance to get to a scale. And we can learn from the US, we can learn from China, but we have to find our own way to go with those things. So not just taking pattern A or pattern B and try to be a me too, but essentially to say what is our way, what are our strengths, and how can we, let's say, learn the mistakes the others made and avoid them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually maybe to add to that, like from sort of a founder's perspective, like people are often surprised when I say that what always inspired us as a company and also as a German company was the German Mittelstand, so the German middle-class companies. That's something that always appealed to us much more than the hyper-growth startup vibe, and I do think that is something that is quite...
The German Mittelstand were your early adopters? No, who were your early adopters?
I think it's definitely companies that were able to move fast. So even Mittelstand companies in the Nordics, they have sort of a slightly different mentality. So we saw those first before we saw the German companies. Then of course startups that can just quickly make decisions, but also surprisingly a lot of
not like US. How about US?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would still at least, especially at the beginning, it's like 60% of our customers. And US also because there's just more tech companies and more startups.
So a little bit more, they rather take a risk, probably.
Like my takeaways?
No. The companies probably take rather a risk in the US than in Germany.
And you have startups that are well-funded. With just a lot of money that they need to spend. But we did also see, German Mittelstand eventually coming around. I think it's more of a it's a personality thing as well. You have like some companies that seem super bureaucratic, but like they can move fast. They have a competent team. They're just like building things, getting shit done. And then on the other hand, you see US companies that operate more like startups and pride themselves on like how they've disrupted whatever. And yeah, they were unable to buy a license from us because, and you know, spent weeks in legal and eventually failed for, you know, something that cost a few €1,000 and they were unable to purchase it because, well, we refused to just change the jurisdiction of our contract for a purchase of $2,000.
Yeah, okay,
so,
like governance.
So you
Who
have,
does not
you have
like
both
governance,
sides.
like
It's a
legal,
lot of,
like, yeah.
and you know, companies, you kind of ship your org chart, so you know, it really depends.
So some more open questions, like quick answers. How do you balance excitement of adopting open source and new stuff with cautious and risk culture? So is it like sandbox model? We don't try. I mean, you probably cannot say we just try and wait until they regulate. So what's the approach to keep up with most, to try new things, to take probably a risk, but not being a risk for the company or like breaking laws or whatever, like how navigate. I think large language models are a really good example, and the data they train on, there's always like a gray area. What's the strategy to navigate?
Yeah. More naturally, to a certain degree, in a global company, you will always find someone somewhere who is interested and curious to try things out. And sometimes you have to see if, let's say, the local regulations are, let's say, more flexible or more tight, and then decide if that's a good idea or a bad idea. But in essence, it's piloting in a sandbox.
Sandbox. Okay. More ideas? Oh.
Yeah, for example, what we do is we have our APIs, for example, to Azure, then OpenAI, then, and that is a safe and secure path for us to utilize LLMs because it's all contractually safe and all that, right, as it has to be. And on that basis, we can build use cases, right? And for example, I found this quite interesting because it seems to be a general problem. We have a software with which we answer to RFPs, so requests for proposals, right? And they offer that you use your own Azure subscription, which is great because then we can use that and in our safe haven, so to say, when it comes to utilizing LLMs, right? So that's actually a quite intriguing thought, even though it all goes then back to Microsoft and OpenAI, but maybe that changes in the future.
How do you navigate? Of course, you're building an open source, but okay, OpenAI is coming with different approaches. Like that, do you think, okay, we just do a thing, we stability, we integrate? How do you keep up? What's like the inner workings of an open source tool like spaCy? Like, I mean, also like navigating innovation from outside, what's happening, not being the next legacy. So
Yes, I mean, I think our work has always been taking what works in research and also what has proven to be effective and make that available for companies to use in a practical sense. And part of that is, of course, you want to follow what's going on, but you also want to keep a bit of a distance. Like you don't want to be just implementing any latest paper that comes out and get really sidetracked. Like you want to see what sticks. And often that's, in research, that's just time. You see how do things develop, and you need to be able to follow that kind of thread and see, okay, this technique has actually proven to work. For example, something like transfer learning finally, works. It's effective. That is actually something. It's very nice to see all these visions that we've had since we started the company come to fruition. We always thought like, someday we will have models good enough that you can bootstrap your AI pipelines with, so you only need very few annotated examples. That's something that's kind of the foundation of our vision, and now it's like we're finally there. So it's and it was kind of playing the long game there. So definitely, I think knowing when to take a step back, and also at every step reasoning about what makes sense, and keeping a close connection to our actual user base, because people are not only looking to us to implement things, but also looking to us for best practices and advice to see what works, how do I approach my problems. And again, the hard part is not which algorithm or model to use. The hard part is I have a business problem. How can I break it down into things that are easy to solve with machine learning? And that is people don't like hearing this because it is something, technology won't magically solve this. Like you always have to think and reason about what the hell you're doing.
How to bring it into application and efficiency.
And there's no playbook, and that makes people uncomfortable, but that is kind of the reality of.
So how do you keep up? I mean, you're in the middle of NLP everywhere, so how do you keep up with the latest developments that are probably not relevant, not natural language processing? So.
Or like other fields?
Yeah, other technologies that you could also benefit spaCy or not, which are not like on the natural path. So there's always like innovation coming from different domain sides.
Yeah, I mean,
do you care? Do you, like, what's your approach to keep up with it?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, definitely kind of, you do need to keep a focus, otherwise you kind of, you have information overload, but definitely, following what's going on, also keeping an open mind and, staying creative, also from like, the application and product perspective. And I feel like that's actually always something I've enjoyed. Like recently I was at a conference where I gave a talk and or like a meetup, and there was a talk that was actually kind of agents and quite not very relevant to what we're doing on page, but like there was an idea in it that I was like, oh, okay, this we can connect to something we've always wanted to do, and there is this new product in there, and so yeah, that's kind of what's currently on my mind, and so that's I think why events like this, for example, are really valuable. And I've already, even now, I've met so many users of our tools, talked about their use cases.
But this is like spaCy, which is like, I would say like a smaller space. Now like, you have like many applications in a large organization. How do you keep up? Do you just like, hey, team, come pitch it to me, I'll decide what's your strategy? How do you keep up with everything? Like just to see what's interesting, what should we try? What's the approach?
So I read, I listen, I talk to people, and sometimes I have stupid ideas. I go over to my team and they say, forget it, we're not doing this. Sometimes they say, okay, we'll have a look, and then they don't do it. And then I ask again, and then they do it. And then sometimes it makes its way into our stack, and sometimes it doesn't. Ultimately, it's about experimentation and about the inception point. So we do have a dedicated team. It's called the Quantum and AI Lab, and their sole purpose and their sole task is essentially to look ahead and tell us when the inception point for an idea, for a technology, for a piece, a component has come, and that we can then have a closer look collectively, experiment with it, and then build it in or not.
Do you also check the other side? Check like outside sources? What should my team look into? Like keep just yourself informed?
Both directions. Ultimately, I also have to be, let's say, stay a separate entity. And also stay a curious mind, even as I'm getting older. And therefore, I also have my own streams of knowledge coming in.
Oh, okay. Actually, I heard RSS feeds.
I'm still using RSS feeds. I'm that old. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Me too. I have not forgiven Google for killing Google Reader.
Yes.
Bringing this up. And,
cool. Yeah. So what was your strategy keeping up with all this? How to decide? Like there's 15 papers, 70 new approaches every day.
My personal challenge really is not to get too excited about everything, right?
Yes.
And you need to maintain some consistency in what you do. So it really sometimes there is more value in getting more of what is already there than jumping ship all the time, right? Of course. We've only recently decided to go with a very well-known cloud database provider that also incorporates analytics and dashboarding and everything. So I think that's a fantastic learning field for us, and there will be a lot of value for us to get out of if we do it correctly. And then it's also a lot of just hard work to get there, and not get distracted, right? That's my challenge.
Oh, yeah, thanks very much. Let's do a fun closing. Quick questions, fast answers. Agents, now or never.
Soon.
Depends on how do you define. I mean, stupid question. I mean, no. I mean, sorry. There are no stupid questions, but this is a.
It's closed.
No, it's really like a question to say, yeah, let's spark like now or never.
Nope.
Nope.
For the right use case, no.
Oh, okay. Diplomatic answer. Yes. The best choice you ever made. No, the best choice is
the best choice
the
ever
best
made.
choice you ever made.
With regards to Python, I guess.
Anything.
I think this really goes back to 2020, where we said for the whole company, we are a Python company.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. We like to hear this at Python conferences. Yeah. So what best
Sorry, I'm
decision
still
ever?
thinking about agents and amending my previous answer.
so probably just all go up to your feminist AI room and maybe hack some agents because we have the hardware and everything there, and we have the right people there.
I'd say I don't know. I have a problem with the way it, the messaging around it. There's of course very good technology there.
We're talking application, but best decision.
Sorry. I think in general, like going into the developer tools space, I do think enabling developers to do stuff is very satisfying. And
Walid, your best decision ever made?
Best decision ever made. My wife, my kids. You didn't specify better.
No, it's a well answer. Everything. So beyond hype, agents. So forget about agents for a minute. No, forget about agents. We never talk. We don't know what agents are. They are like, beyond hype. Which technology should we really look into? Like for mid and long term, beyond all the hypes. Where's the thing? Where's the signal and the noise currently?
Tricky.
Again, I would come from a bit of a different angle. I think now we have that global situation with Donald Trump, etc. Trade war maybe looming, we all don't know. I think everything that's coming out of Europe, especially Germany, is going to be worth a look.
I still believe there is a beautiful competitive advantage in merging hardware and software. So looking into, let's say, a strong software design with a custom hardware chip design. This is something that I believe Apple has played very nicely. More and more companies like Grok in the inference space, and also, I forgot the name of the European companies, also competing in that space. But let's say doing an integrated view is a heavy investment, it's a hefty investment, but I believe it's also a high risk, high opportunity play. I would love to see an European player doing this.
Hardware. Interesting.
Hardware and software, the integration.
Yeah, I think maybe in a similar vein, also in general, product, because I do think product decisions are ultimately what's going to drive the innovation forward and the use cases, and not just the technology, because there's so many decisions you have to make around how should innovation look, and it's like, I think an example I always like to use is the window knocking machine. Back in the day, people would hire a guy to walk around, knock on people's windows, and we have replaced that with technology. But we didn't build window knocking machines; we built alarm clocks. And I think if we go one step further beyond just trying to translate human tasks one to one, that is product.
We have to also start just to replicate what we know
and
into
ultimately
the process.
That is
we have technology, like we have many tools, and we just probably just think, hey, how can we build from these things and not just like rebuild what we have? And I think that's a great closing, and I would like to hand over to Florian to the questions.
Okay, here comes the Slido agent. Ask your questions via Slido. Thank you so much, first of all, for the great discussion. Question to the panel. How do you enforce coding guidelines in your company, especially in teams with varying programming skill levels?
Nicholas, are you out there? You're not out there, or we don't do it? So it's an excellent question. It is actually something, it's a fine line to walk. I believe with more and more Gen AI coming into the coding environments, this is something that can ease. So ultimately, I'm not a strict, let's say, believer in narrow standards in terms, there's only one way to do it. So I like to think of it as a freedom in a frame, as long as you do decent documentation and you, let's say, don't write crappy code that costs us thousands of euros in the run environment. I'm okay. So, but yeah, so I guess it is a question of balance, and ultimately, I hope that in the future also Gen AI empowered IDEs can support better coherence and better quality of code and better documentation.
I think it's also easier. I mean, if I remember, like 4 years ago, we had to write a lot of guidelines, rules, and if you basically do it today, you just say, let's use UV, let's use rough, because also here we are at a completely new level because great people build great standards, they're easy to follow, and basically there's zero discussions anymore about coding styles on this because they were never productive.
Yeah, I mean, remember when you had to like actually hand format code like before black and stuff, where you actually, this is like 90 characters.
Yeah, like all this. And now I think that that's also like, this is like something nobody would basically celebrate this as a big, it's like a big innovation.
Yeah.
It's probably not rocket science, but it's super useful and a real speed up for large teams. We save a lot of time with that.
Maybe in addition to that, I mean, you have a development process, right? That may or may not, hopefully it does, include code reviews, but it goes further, right? So you will have maybe vulnerability scannings at some point in your process, et cetera, then reveals if someone has hard-coded the password, right?
Okay, great. Thank you for your answers. A question to you. Do you have the statistics how many AI ideas or use cases made it to production at your company?
I don't want to make anything up. Actually, I cannot say. We are a 100-people company, I would say. We have at least 5 very good use cases that I know of. Yeah? Maybe 10 more in the pipeline that have potential. Yeah. I think that is the scope.
Thank you. And then next question. What do you think about the effect of AI on production processes based on 3D printing?
It's a very specific question.
Yeah.
Wow. So I don't know. You're not into 3D printing. Quoniam is awful one.
It's kind of cool. Like I've always wanted like a 3D printer.
Well, maybe the question goes into that direction of you can use AI to work with Blender, for example, to render some 3D models and then put that in production. Maybe that is the question. No, but also if that were the question, I couldn't answer it.
I would say let's skip that question if we cannot.
Sorry.
So what I do know that, for example, talking about German Mittelstand, the company Trumpf is using a steel cutting machine that is using AI to optimize layouts for steel cutting machines to reduce waste, for example. So you don't do manually the design anymore, but AI optimizes and color codes the different parts and how to split them up afterwards, so you have less waste in it. So that's one application.
Thank you so much. As the moderator, I inform you that we are out of time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you for being around.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and enjoy the conference.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.